Good evening and welcome. It's Monday, February 27th, and this is the Village of Lake Bluff's Finance Committee meeting. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Member Rappin?
Here.
And Chair Inkeman?
Here. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting dated November 14th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Approved. Motion to approve.
All right. And I will second that. Is there any updates regarding corrections?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Okay, off to the second item. Next, we allow any visitors or virtual visitors who would like to speak on something to the committee for an item that's not on the agenda, and there's no one in the room, and there is no one online attending. So we will skip to the business discussion items. The first item is a review of the budget calendar. So flipping to the calendar and walking through it, we can see that we've gotten through the January assembling of the preliminary budgets and the departmental budget discussions. And today, as a finance committee, we're going to review the schedule, and then we're going to talk about the general fund operating budget. We're going to review the CIP schedule and look at the multi-year capital equipment and the capital projects. And then from here, the next milestone is March 13th, where we'll have another finance committee meeting before the regularly scheduled village board meeting, and we'll review the comprehensive fee schedule and the water operating budget schedules, as well as the pay plan. On March 22nd, we will receive the tentative budget virtually. March 29th would be the public hearing being announced and put on notice. And then April 10th would be the first public hearing regarding the tentative budget, and the 24th of April would be the village board's discussion and hopefully the final adoption of the budget ordinance. Any comments regarding the schedule or perceived problems with maintaining that time frame?
Not from staff's perspective. This is, to remind folks, this is the second year of a 2-year fiscal plan. So typically this review is a little less in depth because it's already been talked about at length a year ago.
Right.
And so that's been the practice. And so usually at this time, we're highlighting the changes from the approved plan. What does that look like? Most of those changes you've already seen, some of the bigger ones, and some of the ones you haven't, we'll walk through that, but that's it.
Yes, and I know staff put together a really nice bridge analysis, which I did not look at first. I looked at all the details because that's just the way my brain works. And then as Drew pointed out to me, there's a really, really nice analysis that kind of bridges what was and what is. So if you've had a chance to look at that, it's kind of self-explanatory in terms of what things have been moved between the years. Again, this is year 2 of that 2-year budget. So were there any comments regarding the bridge analysis and some of the changes?
Can we do a quick, just kind of walk through?
I would love it.
Okay.
Love
and
it.
so I think hopefully this will make things easier for everyone.
Yeah.
Bettina and I, we walk through it, and first thing we do is look at the revenue side of the ledger, and then we look at the expenses on the revenue side. There's some things you notice are slightly different. Some of the things are missing. Some of the high dollar ones, or there were some grants that we thought we may get. And some grants we include in the budget, and some we don't. And I'll let Bettina talk about that in a second. The other, probably the biggest change in revenue stream is the village lost some rent. We had a handful of, when T-Mobile and AT&T joined, they dumped some redundant infrastructure that they had on our tower, and so we lost that revenue stream, and that's effective January of next year. And so you see that reflection there, and then we went back and looked at our interest income and bumped that up a little bit. and sales tax. This is something I had a conversation with Member Rappin about earlier. Generally speaking, again, from a philosophical approach to budgeting, conservative on revenue estimates and a little more bold on expenditure side of things. So that's how we typically have done things over the years here with, I say, fairly good success in maintaining the village's objectives when it comes to fund balances and also not getting in a bind. Would you please be so kind, Bettina, to talk about what we include in terms of certain types of grants and how we show them and not show them in the budget and or ledger?
Sure. So the grants that we receive related to most of the state and federal funded projects related to construction aren't reflected in grants because they're reimbursable expenditure type grants. So 80-20, where we're putting out 20% of the cost and 80% is reimbursed or actually paid by that entity on its own. So that's not represented as grant money in our ledger because it isn't cash on hand to us. Those funds that are grant monies are the actual funds that we receive cash for and expend on our own without restriction, other than the project, that was defined for the grant.
So one of the ones that we had in this current year budget was the one for the Block 1, right? Obviously didn't get that money, but in the soon-to-be, I guess, early out years of the multi-year capital plan, there's 80-20 money for the Granbury Road project. We also look at some other grants, but I just want to make that clear what's included. On the expense side of the ledger, there's that worksheet listing all the various changes, and some of these, I'll just kind of go through these quickly and highlighting them. The internet service increase, that's a redundancy thing. That was a board-approved contract when the village added that to AT&T contract to supplement our Comcast connections. IT services, to remind folks, the village is a member of the GovITC consortium along with Buffalo Grove, Lincolnshire, Glenview, Kenilworth, and some other communities, and we've been part of that for several years. We benefit in that we're a very small shop and we get to piggyback on them and all of their users and get access to vendors who would not normally bid on our projects or provide us service. So we get a higher caliber and quality of service provider, and we've had the same service provider actually out of Atlanta, Georgia for the last several years. That contract came due, and we went out to bid, and we're still analyzing, we're interviewing 3 firms, but we know we're going to see an increase. We've been very fortunate in our expenses, but we know we're going to see an increase. And also to remind folks, when the village entered into this intergovernmental agreement, they gave that group the authority to enter in contracts to provide those services, because for the joint procurement, that was a necessary thing. And so right now, it looks like the group is, again, we're looking to interview, and so far it seems like everybody's going to continue to be part of the consortium, but others are seeing even bigger increases than we are. So it's always possible another municipality may drop out, and that may blow up the whole thing. That hasn't happened yet, but that's always a possibility. I'll keep moving. If somebody has a question, please stop me. This bicycle repair station, this is one of those where this is where the village has had to break apart a capital project. And this is an improvement that the village was gifted by the 125 committee. And we've grouped the sidewalk work with our concrete bids, and we're ordering all the other facilities, the benches, the trash cans, the bike repair station. We'll see when they show up. Some things have a longer delay. And then we're going to bid the landscaping work too shortly. But this is one of those, is a rollover where we just couldn't get the project awarded in the last year. The village has put in about anywhere from $50,000 to $25,000 in the ongoing marketing campaign. The village has used this from time to time on various projects and looks to continue that investment. It's been as high as 50 in the past. Most of the time that doesn't get used. There's been a couple of projects that we thought we were going to do, but good news, bad news is that the village, the campaign we were looking to do had to do with helping market real estate in the community, and that's not a problem when there's fewer than 10 houses on the market. So we kind of set that aside and may revisit that. But right now the idea is that likely campaign will involve the village's historic preservation programs, And that's getting close to conclusion, so we suspect that'll be ready to go come next fiscal year. The village looked to do a update to its comprehensive plan this year. That got bumped. Some of that had to do with the extended time it took to complete the residential PRD code update. The village has only so much bandwidth to do these types of studies. There's a lot of those in this, but this is one that's a rollover. There is a team of folks that are helping us select a consultant to include the chair of the PCZBA, Gary Peters, Ben Schuster, who is the staff attorney for that advisory body, as well as 2 residents, Rob Douglas, who's a developer and property manager and former Historic Preservation Commission member and former head of the Park District, who's a community, at-large person who we thought would be a great person with his skills as an architect to help us select a consultant. Similarly, we went to a current school board member who is also a historic preservation architect, Tim Pinich, and thought that would be another good way to connect with the community. And he's helping us as part of that team as well. We're going to interview a couple of folks here in about 2 weeks, a couple of firms. At the same time, we are going to interview a 3rd firm who submitted a proposal that was incomplete, but their specialty rests with missing middle housing. And one of the things that keeps coming up at the BAC meetings is looking at the village's R5 zoning and revisiting that. And a lot of the village-owned parcels in the downtown may be opportunities for redevelopment. And so that was something that we thought, since we have them on the hook and we're going to be together, why don't we review what they've submitted and see if they can provide a proposal to do that. So there's money in the budget to do that as well, should that come to fruition. And just as a reminder, this is a budget. It doesn't lock in things, right? It's the idea these are placeholders. Staff will bring these projects to you. As you know, we've done things and talked about, okay, now it's a good time to do this. We want to make sure everybody's still pushing this along and everybody wants to be part of it. So these are placeholders, and so that we are prepared to do these activities. For example, intergovernmental contributions to the senior housing project in Lake Forest. That's been approved by the city council. That's moving forward. I had the city manager from Lake Forest mention to me he'll be talking to me soon about this. So we included money this time. We've talked about it for a number of years, but now it's probably time to put it in the fiscal plan. 41-176 is another one of those projects that the village is looking at trying to complete this year. It says SB Freeman. We're probably going to go with a different firm that provided a different scope of work and less expensive. But
What phase of work is this
so
considered?
this is the 41-176 interchange.
But what phase is it? Is this like phase 1, phase 2? I mean, where are we?
It's preliminary planning. What is possible? What is likely in the market conditions?
It just seems like we're always there. We're never, yeah.
So the construction side of the intersection is actually in phase 2, which is they're supposed to be doing land acquisition and developing plans for putting them out to bid. That has been stuck in purgatory of trying to procure pumps that aren't made in America. And long story short is they're not there yet, but the idea is there's a lot of activity in the neighborhood that's still pretty early, but there's people trying to assemble properties and see if they can make a site more developable or not. And so the village had a lot of success when we did the Waukegan Road Corridor study and getting ahead of that. And I think that helped make that entitlement of that project go a lot faster than normally would have. I mean, it got through the chute in 6 months, which is unheard of. So it certainly impressed Target, and I think the good news was the village got that done in time because that was the last of 3 buildings they built in North America for a very long time. I mean, that was like, it got to the end when they weren't building anymore. Like, we got in, timing was good. So we don't want to think about it had that not had happened. And so that's really the administrative side of things where a lot of the rollover projects were. Strategic plan, that's one of those where we had budgeted $20,000 is about what the village had spent, but like everything else in the universe, this has gone up a lot. The consultant that the village has used in the past, Lynn Montai, the village has really embraced her, from the residents to the participants. The number you see there would fit her proposal in. I did solicit another proposal from a different firm And the work, the scope was less, and in fact, it did not have community engagement as part of it, which is not the Lake Bluff way, and was just $10,000 less than this. And so if I assume that if we brought that in, the price would go up even more than what Lynn was providing. So I think that's about right for the market. And so Regis and I have talked about this and said likely the timing of this would be in the fourth quarter of this calendar year when the new board members came on and kind of got their feet wet and were prepared to, just like we kind of waited a little bit of time for the board retreat. So similar vein there. Grounds maintenance, this was actually something we had budgeted. Surprising, the numbers came under, and the current provider is saying they're going to hold their prices for another year. And so that's good news. Equipment, this is, we had a conversation in the last meeting about Flock and the cameras, and that's reflecting that increase that was discussed. You'll see that contract at the next board meeting. Not tonight, but 2 weeks from tonight. These next, yeah.
Really quick question. So I thought with the license plate readers that the money that we were going to use to pay for those was coming from.
Current year dollars?
I thought it was coming from, we were gonna put some lockers or something in the public safety building, but we found a cheaper way to do that, and so we were using those dollars. So am I reading that right, that's what we're gonna add? We're gonna add $20,000. Are we just moving it?
No, the $20,000 is the maintenance cost outward in the out years.
Okay.
The initial cost would still be in this budget year, because you're right, they're not doing the lockers.
Okay, thanks.
You remember correctly. So these next few items here dealing with the public safety building, these are facility improvements. These were planned to happen this year, but because the exterior roofing problem took so long to figure out, that we didn't want to have the whole place torn up at once. And so we're gonna let the exterior work happen, and then we're gonna bump this interior work to follow. So that's why we decided that this was more practical. And then there's the roof project will happen first, the flat roof, all that's all related to that work. The ABR is already approved, or recommended for approval, so, and budgeted. The forestry program, again, is one of those programs that came in higher when we bid it out than the estimates we had been provided by a couple of different firms, and but that reflects the contract was already approved, so actual dollars versus budgeted. Again, TJF pricing reduction from prior year. And then street rehab price again went down, and then the absence of the complete Block 1 grant. Jeff, in terms of the Block 1 light, I know we've been working with Tesca to come up and revise that plan. The Block 1 light, in terms of where they're at, that number that's in the multi-year plan's around 750, I think, or 720. And you felt pretty good about that number. It's about what we could shave.
50 the first year.
Yeah.
For planning, and then 7.
Yeah.
So that's in the 15-year
It's in the
summary?
multi-year plan. It's
Right.
2 years out, I think.
FY25 shows the
Yeah.
15-year, or $50,000 engineering planning, and then 700 in FY26.
How much difference is there between the CBD
Oh,
light
yep.
and the CBD, the standard CBD?
About 500,000?
In current dollars, yes, when we push that out 2 or 3 years, that's why it only looks like 350.
Okay. Are we still having a flat space?
Yes, curbless. Yes, and the biggest price differential is going from, the planner had recommended a concrete street.
That's the deal, okay.
That's the big reduction.
Are we still doing the Festoon lighting, matching the one on the?
No, can't afford that. And even some of the, we were gonna bid the package. Yeah, could we fit that in with that amount? So,
No, that's kind of regrettable. That has such a cool effect on the village at night
Yeah.
for what we have done until now.
We can be retrofitted, especially the festoons, because the plan had all those poles and grassy areas and landscape, so those could be added later, power is there.
Okay, thank you.
so that is the list, the hot hit list. The capital plan, we went back and looked at, and a couple things we've been trying to do is recognize, again, that we've talked about as part of the stormwater utility plan, is that level investment in all the assets. One of the things we've been talking about is increasing that amount to match inflation, and that's done in certain places in here. Bettina, you want to highlight some of that?
I changed it on the water fund sheet that we
Okay,
haven't discussed
okay.
yet,
So-
sitting in front of me.
So some of the out-year projects we did bump up. I'm trying to see the,
So it's not changed,
Yeah.
you know, the water improvements are not changed on here, but on the draft that.
stormwater.
Right,
Stormwater it is.
Yep.
If you look at, it does have the deep tunnel happening. It has
Hard to zoom in.
the Green Bay Road project, which is probably the next big thing for us. Jeff, I don't know if you can come up and talk about the Green Bay Road project. And again, from a high level, you guys haven't seen that in a long time. We probably will have to at some point this year is roll those drawings back out and hold. We held a handful of community forums about that, and the general feedback from the community who lived along Green Bay Road was, keep it like it is. Keep it feel like a residential project. I don't know if you follow what's been happening in Highland Park about the push about bike lanes and all that.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that. We're keeping like it is, like a neighborhood street, and we're trying to save as many trees as we can. And the other thing, that the most common issue is, can you add crosswalks? And that the answer is yes. So, but
Yeah, in the next week or so, we're gonna submit another application for 80/20 funding through a CMAP program, which is a similar pot of money to the Council of Mayors that we've applied to in the past and finished just outside of. This is a larger project, regional pot of money, which we met with CMAP. They said it would seem like a good project for that program. So we will submit an application for $5 million because that's the minimum project for that program. And we'll find out probably this fall. And if that is unsuccessful, we'll go back. It's a 2-year cycle with the other Council of Mayor money, and we'll go back into that a year from now. And as the street deteriorates, the score keeps going up. So eventually it has to happen. But I mean, it's kind of frustrating. We thought this would have happened this year or next year, and it's probably going to be at least to 25 or 26. The bridge, Green Bay Road Bridge, is still hung up with the State Historical Society. We're trying to get them to approve taking down those old iron trusses, which they have not agreed to do so yet. So we're still poking away at that. Hopefully we'll have good information on that. I think Drew, probably in April.
we tried to turn up the volume on that because we don't want to be in a situation where, okay, let's say CMAP says you're funded now, then we're still fighting with the Illinois Historic Preservation. Well, almost came out.
Yeah.
And didn't want to be in a situation where that was holding us up. So we're going to work with our consultant to try to poke that and get it moving.
In terms of Green Bay Road and bicycles, I mean, I look at that as being, you know, north-south, and then the bike trail being north-south, not that far away.
Yeah.
It just, is there any, I don't know, any pressure to include a bike lane when really not that far away, there's already good north-south, you know?
Complete streets.
And that is part of we do have a complete streets policy, which recommends we should do something for biking, but it's not something that forces us to do that. In our applications for funding, there are other points for complete streets, but part of our application says there is an alternate route for bikes.
Yeah.
And it is accounted for, and we're gonna do this the way we want to, but it's also accommodated elsewhere. So that is part of our applications. We explain why we don't need to do bike lanes on this street.
Right. Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense because it's just not that far away, and the additional space that it would require, and,
The damage to trees and
Yeah.
parkways, and there's so many driveways and intersections, wouldn't be a very good bike lane anyway.
yep. Okay, thank you.
So that's really it in a nutshell. And again, we're happy to take questions. I think for those of you that may have not gone through this process in the past or seen a second year budget, some of these conversations get down a little more detailed than normal because you can. And that was one of the things that previous boards, when we decided to go this route, to have a 2-year plan, is the benefit of it is that you get comfortable enough with it that you're only looking at some minor details in the second year, knowing that if you're not changing service levels, you're not changing, head count. This is a maintenance budget other than really the capital, then let's not waste people's time and let's focus on other things we want to focus on, so.
Right. Any further comments or questions?
So I might have missed this, you might have said this earlier about the CBD streetscape. Is it projected all the way out to 2032 with these numbers, just because we're not sure when we're gonna do it? Like 600, 650, 100, 650,
Oh, no, that's the street
Street you
MFT.
have, I think.
is that, am I looking at the wrong line?
Yeah, you're just off one line.
Oh, okay, then that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah.
Just below.
Got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
You know, one of the projects that.
A lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
One of the things that's in the budget that we've talked about, and maybe you guys don't want to talk about it, not to, you guys certainly feel free to ask your questions, but like the Glen Avenue footbridge, that pedestrian bridge, that's going to the ABR next week, the landscape plan, and we are hopeful that we'll actually have the bridge to be reviewed too. We had some drawings come back that we worked with Bob Hunter this morning. We are so lucky to have him, by the way. He shows up like, in case of problem, break glass, and he comes running. And he reminds me of that all the time. He's like, just call me. He's been great. So,
So we got an initial drawing from the bridge supplier that needs some work, so we're trying to see if they can revise it in a way that makes it a little smaller, a little scales down a little bit so that it doesn't look so large.
but that project is something we hope to build this year.
This coming fiscal year.
Yes.
Yes, yes, as long as we can work out our issues with our current, supplier, that they can do what we need, then we should be able to get that done summer to fall.
Fantastic. I wish I could be here when the board sees it all happen.
So I went through this in detail with Drew earlier, and I really don't have any material comments. I will say, Drew, I would love it at some point if you would share the branding with us, just whatever we have done over the past couple of years,
Yeah.
I haven't seen an image, in a while. So that would be nice just at some point to do that. Really excited about the strategic plan. I think, having gone through
Yeah.
that the first time, it's great guidance for us. The comprehensive plan, it's been 20 years. That's the deal.
Yep.
The streetscape, for me, is the one that I still would really like to see something happen according to what we really want it to be. So I think I'm aligned with you, Regis, that, this isn't budgeted till 2025. So if there's an opportunity to have further discussions about cost relative to our needs, it would be great. And what I spoke with Drew about today is just remind you guys that last year we talked about kind of doing a little bit of a test of using those parallel spaces and having dining extend out there, and apparently the owner, the landlord, was unable to get that erected and built, and it would be great. I think, Drew, you're going to reach out to Rob Douglas.
Left him a voicemail before this meeting.
Okay, great, because I think that would be a great test for us to help decide what we want to do in the full CBD streetscape. So
I have seen, one thing I should say is I have seen an example of that type of build in Napa, in the city of Napa, and where they had blocked street as well, and they had built that deck that was about this high from the ground, creating a very flat and very inviting space, and I think it would be very beneficial to us. I really liked it, and I have a couple pictures if you guys want to see that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Rob Douglas said he had purchased all the materials to do it and just couldn't get a contractor to build it. And so we talked like in January, and I said, I suspect the board would want to still test it. We didn't get the grant, and if you could make it happen, let's try to make it happen. And I talked to him about him before our BAC meeting last week, and I followed up again today. So see if we can make it happen.
a separate question, but when we did the festoon lighting over in Block 2, wasn't there going to be some lighting, consistent lighting along all of the storefronts going all the way to Bluffington's? Or was that not part of the scope?
There were 2 additional outdoor lighting opportunities. One was at the end of Scranton Alley,
Yeah.
and the other one was by Bluffington's.
Yeah.
And those
Okay.
were pulled for cost reasons.
Got it.
Doesn't mean they couldn't be installed at a later date, just,
And although the electric is there, does something need to happen kind of under the grass if we're going to kind of take advantage of having some work there already, so that if we were to, after the fact, plop something down there?
So the festoons only have power to one pole, and it's just, they're connected in the air. So there would be a pole pretty close to where there's a pole box where there is power right now, if you're
I
talking
see.
block 1, and then they could do that pretty minimally. I think the bigger question is with the seat walls, because the way the concrete wants to come right up to the seat walls, you can't install that later without disturbing some concrete, which
Right.
isn't the worst thing in the world. It's gonna happen eventually anyway. We're going to redo some things, but that's just a little bit of sunk cost if you have to go back and tear some out.
Right, and it never quite looks the same, you know? So as much as we can plan ahead, I think is probably better. And that's why I was thinking, you know, if we could, you know, if we know that there's only gonna be that one pole and we kind of do most of that stuff that's not actually completing the project, where all the expenses with the poles and all that, then I think it'll help it to all look better, not like we're just ripping stuff apart and everything's kind of an afterthought, you know?
Yeah, and there will be some thought to that, and
Yeah.
it says 25, but that's FY 25, which is summer of 24. So we,
Oh,
you know, this spring, when we get that through the ABR and Jody and Tesca's designs, we can get that approved, we can get on engineering, you know, this summer for bidding for next summer.
Great.
So for the light, if we do the reduced cost on block 1, and we don't put I thought the idea of the lights was to encourage people to park at the train station and sort of have the lights to guide them into the town, to have the festoon lighting. I thought we had talked about that as part of the plan. So we're not, it sounds like we wouldn't be doing any lights with that, or?
Right now, those are cut. I mean, we're getting a roster of things we can do that we call a block 1 light to try to bring the cost down, because the 1.1 million was too much. And the festoons are an easy thing to take out because they are in grass areas, and put it back in later. Going from a concrete street, which would be to completely reconstruct Scranton, you know, from the dirt up, to just to resurface and kind of fix the curbs like we normally do, like we did with block 2. That's a big chunk. The festoons is the second big chunk. And I guess once we get better numbers from block 1 light, I mean, it's obviously up to you guys what you want to budget for.
I think it would be great if we just could be able to give a little bit of input into that design. I know something will be presented to us, but an option, you know, on the lighting, or an option. You're working on a budget that you have today. You know, I look at the revenue budget, and I said this to Drew, it looks fairly conservative, right? And we may exceed it. So if there is extra revenues, it would be nice to be able to do what we want to do.
We can certainly take the original plan, adjust it for inflation, and compare that against the light, and, you know, you can order off the menu what we want to pay for.
One important point about the lights, following on Steve, is it's about appearances, it's about attracting people to our town. So I'm not going to say that people are attracted to lights, but still the light is going to provide an appearance to the town that is inviting. And so we could do a lot of work on the street, and not lighting it up would be a waste in some ways. So the light is actually, even though I know this is very easy to remove, is actually an important element just to capitalize on what we just achieved.
And part of the timing issue is that the sidewalks are cracked, the street is in bad shape, so we're probably in it for $250,000 just to fix it as it is. So what would be the increase to make it better?
well, and looking where the crosswalk is, I mean, wouldn't the light that's issuing, you know, or, you know, encouraging people to come across the Sheridan, wouldn't that be not on the north side, but it would be on the left, on the south side, because that's where the pedestrian crossing already is. So then it kind of means that you've got,
There's 2 there.
oh, there are 2.
North and south.
Cross on the
Yeah.
north side.
Oh.
Yeah.
As a total aside, for that festoon lighting that's in there now, is there a dimmer?
There is not a dimmer. We went through that. That was frustrating. We thought we could put a dimmer on it. Other
Yeah.
communities have had their lights fail
Yeah.
because they aren't,
Oh,
I'm not an electrical engineer, but they
Okay.
aren't made to dim, and people have tried that and damaged their lights.
Okay, so it's a one voltage situation. Do we turn them off in the middle of the night?
They go off, no, not now. We're working, that is what we need to get, is
Timer.
the timer.
Okay.
But we talked about, Chair Hunter and I have talked about taking out every other light bulb.
that's what I was thinking. Couldn't you
That's
have
right.
2 versions
Yep.
where one is all of them and another is
Oh, 2 settings.
50%?
Yeah.
Is it too bright for you?
Well, I mean, it's one person's opinion, but it's pretty bright. Yeah.
So we were gonna pop those
Yeah.
out.
We're already at the
I'm not the
maximum
only one, right?
spacing.
No, you're not.
Well, and wouldn't it just, yeah, I was gonna say, even if you didn't pop it out, can't you just change the bulbs to be a different wattage?
No, but when we first put it in and the AVR looked at it, I mean, this is what they asked for, right? The little hats.
Right.
Right, and the spacing.
Right.
And we went with the biggest spacing available, because you could have gotten even like one every foot.
Yeah,
And we went, no, let's go the widest.
Yeah.
So I think now we need to unscrew every other bulb.
okay,
That's the next step.
okay.
And we looked at Wilmette, they had bulbs in there that were warmer, but they looked like Halloween. It was like, no, that's orange, no, you don't want that. Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, capital is always of great interest, so thank you for all those details.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, for the remaining parts of the conversation, we want to do a preview of the next meeting, kind of get ahead and talk about the water fund a little bit.
Okay,
Great.
If that's all right?
that'd be great.
Make use of the time. But Dan, you want to first talk about our Canadian friends?
Sure. Why is it not sharing? Interesting.
Are you doing a screen share?
Can I just add that there was this page that was in the report, the attachment number 2, the funding and programming capital considerations?
Yes.
Like, this was so good. I feel like we should have this on the website somewhere for people to look at, for residents to look at when they're wondering, like, why are they spending money this way? I felt
did
like
think it was
this
really good.
answered so many questions
We
that you
put
might
that together
have.
last year, thank you. We put that together last year when we put together our grading system for all the projects.
Yeah.
That was the kind of the calculus that goes into all this.
I would love to see this pulled out as just
Yeah.
if you're comfortable doing it, putting it on the website
Yep.
and
We'll
giving.
pull it out separately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great
Felt
document.
like it was good for all the new board members to kind of say, you know, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And it was very helpful.
So a sneak preview, I looked at some software that comes from a vendor called Waterworth. Fairly inexpensive. It is somewhat Excel-like, but it brings everything together and would be consistent as years move forward in creating baseline scenarios and track revenue and expenses all in the same place as the years progress. And 10, 15 years down the road, if the tool is still working and functioning, it would be the same process that you could look back at instead of in those sheets that I've given you that have migrated and changed over the years. And also could be used for other funds if we chose to add them to, or if there was a new fund that we needed to add. So right now, they just have our data in here that shows, it was from the test demo, so he's working on adding expenditures correctly, but right now it shows sales, the baseline trend, and operating expenditures. And it's kind of nifty. I could go through it a little bit, but I'm not that I'm not that adverse at it yet. You're laughing at me. But it's, you know, you can click on certain parts of it and it'll bring you to what those numbers are, and you can get rid of things and it'll change the chart fairly quickly. You can insert scenarios, 2%, 1%, 3%, what does that look like? It also has the ability to track some assets. So just to give you a quick sneak preview of what I'm working on as far as moving some of this data into a different perspective. So that's coming in. It might be completed scenario version for the next meeting.
And the
with
goal
the
is to,
correct data.
right, to say, hey, we know we need to be making the last few months, we've been talking about that stormwater utility and the level investment number we've been using is 400,000, but we think,
Right.
again, we need to account for inflation, and these probably needs to be $500,000 at least, and then show it increasing in the out years and for this model. And so we're gonna do that, and we know, I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but you know, the village is still trying to find that lost water, right? We buy water in bulk from Jawa. We step on the price to help pay for our infrastructure and wheel it out. And in the process of wheeling it out through our system, there's water that we purchased that we can't account for in the billing, right? So there's a loss. And that loss is we replaced all the meters, so we felt like we're accurately measuring what we're dealing with, but we still know there's a loss. And we we do a number of things. One is when we know there's a water break, we fix it immediately. Two, we employ engineering's systems to listen to our water main. You can hear leaks, and most of the time we've done that, it's been finding small leaks that are actually on services, not to the mains itself, not the transmission mains, but private services. So it's been very frustrating trying to figure out where is this loss occurring, and there's a dead-end water main that goes up just west of the Public Works that we have had breaks on from time to time, but it's not serving anybody, so we're going to turn that off at the horizontal main. So we start eliminating things that could be leaking, even though we don't think they are, and just try to figure out and isolate the problem. But we did find some in the meters, which we thought we would, and the persons who were trying to sell us the meters saying you will find enough to even pay for the meters. I don't think that was true, but at the end of the day, it did help find some, but we're still dealing with that, because why does all that matter is, well, one, we're in a regulatory environment that is becoming increasingly more aggressive in how they manage the villages draw out of Lake Michigan. In fact, there's, do you want to talk about that really quickly, Jeff? Yeah.
So we, along with a lot of the communities around us, have an allocation of Lake Michigan water. We take from Lake Michigan. It doesn't go back to Lake Michigan.
It's our share of the
So
big
this
lake.
has
Yeah.
been the subject of numerous lawsuits between all the Great Lakes states versus Illinois over the last 100 years, I think about. And the state is concerned those are going to come back. They do come back every once in a while. So they have a department that regulates allocations and makes us do a report on our loss every year and how much, I say loss, but really it's non-revenue water, because some of it we use ourselves in our street sweeper and our sewer jet, all those things, but still non-revenue water because we don't sell it. They've chosen to do their program that way. I'm not sure why, but so this year we had about a 20%. So 1 in 5 gallons that we bought, we did not sell. And that's actually better than it's been. We've had as high as 27 to 29%. Changing all the meters as low as 15, 17 recently. One of the problems we've always had is our meters were so antiquated that it was really hard to get an accurate number. So we're better now. The loss that Drew was just referring to in the dead end, that was 6 million gallons of water over about a week before.
Wow.
It
So
was
when you
fixed.
say we've been as good as 17, does that include an estimated allocation for use within the village that you're not
So
charging for?
we have not exceeded our allocation, but what they've done this year is they've lowered our allocation.
What I mean is, when we say that we have a loss of 17%, does that mean that you've already said that we used X number of gallons internally and we didn't charge for it? Do you know
No,
what I
that
mean?
is non-revenue, stuff we did not sell. We are trying to get better at tracking what we use.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And
Like the
that's
tracking
something
of what
that
we
we're-
use, because that's not true loss, like the pipe had a big leak.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not revenue producing.
And that's a big part, is you're allowed a certain amount to say, okay, we'll say, what's the number for losses due to leaks? There's a
Well,
flat
it's a
rate.
1.25% for use is what they
But ours could
take
exceed
off.
that, because, like the Green Bay Road 176 main is significant, and when that lets loose, there's a lot more volume that comes out of that. But we don't get to say, we know where it went, we know where it is.
Right,
We don't get to get the credit for it. So it just goes to,
right.
Our meters have done a good job. I think realistically, we're at normally about 15%. We hit 20 because of some major leaks. We were averaging like 8 to 12 leaks a year for many years. The last 2 years, we were over 20.
Oh my
Is that the new normal, or is that a blip due to some winter weather issues? I don't know yet, and that's kind of hard to foresee going forward, because we don't budget enough to do massive, replacements of water mains. There's a few trouble spots that we know of, but not like we can just do the North Terrace and then solve our problem. It's all sprinkled throughout, so it's
Wow.
it's an issue, and since we've had the new meters, we've been able to do it monthly, and Glenn was working a lot on that as well. And that's where I feel like we're 15, 17%, I think was your analysis too, as we look at it month to month. But hopefully we can have a better year than we've had with water breaks, and then report a better figure to Dean. Our permit says we're not supposed to exceed 10%.
Wow.
And they are not coming, doing enforcement on that. And I had the discussion with them this year, well, they'd have to ramp it up. They're not going to all of a sudden say, you're out of compliance, fix this right now. So there is some time to try to keep bringing this down. The other thing they did is they actually lowered our allocation this year to our actual usage, I think from 2017 or 2018.
And that wasn't punitive, that was,
Everybody's
Everybody.
getting that, right?
Water use per capita has gone down. We are not growing right now, so we are pretty comfortable. That year that they used was one where we had 24 or 25% water loss, so it's not like we're just, banging up against our allocation.
Right.
But that is just one way they're trying to tighten it up. IEPA is trying to show everybody else that they're taking this seriously so they don't get sued, or maybe the lawsuits are less successful. But that is something that just keeps going. There's no.
so one of the things that we can do, there's other things you can do besides, you can continue to invest in your infrastructure. We can replace more water mains. From an economics basis, break fix is less expensive than replacing water mains and the valve. But the problem is when things break, our valves are inoperable. So what Jeff's been doing is programmatically, when we replace mains, that's when we're doing, that's the most efficient time to replace valves when you're doing it, as opposed to trying to do a valve insert somewhere. It's very costly. So one of the things we can do is invest more in the system. The village right now, we've borrowed money. We borrowed the money to do the water meters, and that is was a 15-year note, I believe. And so we've got some time before we get to a place where we can invest again in the system. The village has a history of kind of saving up and doing a big splash over a couple of years of spending on its water main system. But this is something that a village needs to be, I guess, this year we're gonna, and we thought a good way to do is invest in this software to demonstrate this more clearly, is probably have a little more aggressive outlook on how the rates should go up to cover that capital
Right.
element
Right.
through the rate.
Right.
But you're still talking 17 to 20% loss on the total delivery. And so the question to you would be, what can we do as a board to help you going faster to find what the issue is, besides listening or knowing better your network? Where can we spend money now to help you finding the issue, for example?
We're a little bit of a standstill with that. So there are ways to isolate areas of the village to try to break it down into smaller chunks and look for loss. As I've looked into that, most communities try to break their system down into pods the size of Lake Bluff. So for us to try to cut that in half or in a quarter, we're small compared to most other systems. Some of these there are other technologies, but it doesn't seem like we have a couple of smoking guns out there that are just leaking. So I'm trying to not spend money on studies. If we're going to spend money, we know we have probably 15 to 20 miles of water main that need replacing, so put every dollar we can into water main. It's insanely expensive to replace. It's like $350 per every foot of water main you change, if you look at a budget number. So you talk about doing 1,000 feet, that's not very far in our system, but yet it's $300,000. So it's a little bit of a standstill. I don't know if it's a matter of doing another bond at some point, a larger bond to do, we did one, I think in 07, 08, where we did, was it $7 million worth of work over 3 years? And that was kind of the last big push we did in water main. We talk about the budget, 400, 500,000 a year, going. This past year, we combined that into one project at $1 million, just to try to get a better bid, a better scale of a project. $400,000 projects don't get the biggest companies looking after it. They get a couple of bids, sometimes a few more, but very few serious bidders like to operate in that range. Most of the bigger companies would like a bigger project. So there are maybe some opportunities to partner with other communities, but that is hard because every community has very specific requirements they want in their water main. We've looked at potentially going, we've always had ductile iron water mains. We did a portion of PVC on Ravine last year because it was a little cheaper. So we keep looking at trying to bring our costs down through our material selection and our engineering. But there are big needs, but like Drew had said, the cost to fix it is not the same as the cost to replace it. So from a dollar standpoint, we're not worse off for doing all the fixes that we've done, but eventually it's just going to keep more and more breaks, and we're gonna have to do more and more replacement.
So I have another idea in mind, and I apologize for what might come out of my mouth next. But
That's a setup.
I mean, we're talking about millions of gallons that are getting lost in the nature. I mean, that's basically the point, right? One out of every 5 gallons just disappears. So the idea I had was there might be another explanation to that. And so that's what would come to me as a computer science guy. We probably are missing a part of a picture. And so the idea I had was, in these cases, going physical, looking at pipes might not actually work at the end of the day, but data science might actually do it. That is, the trend, the analysis of the data, maybe device by device on the network, or maybe looking at the part of the device of a network using data science, that is doing trending, doing stats, doing a lot of things you can do on that, might actually be great, might actually tell us something, but I don't think we have enough data to do that yet.
We're getting to that point, having the meters read every month. I think we're short about 20 to 30 meters in the whole village that just haven't been changed yet because we can't get into somebody's house, or one of them has asbestos wrapped all over it, and that's been a problem trying to change it. Or some people's water we just can't shut off without digging the street up to change the meter. So there's a few one-offs, but we feel much better about the data right now. We found a couple accounts, I think, just through the meter change that just weren't being accounted for. But even, most residential accounts do 60, 80,000 gallons a year, and we purchase 230 million and we sell about 180 million. That's correct. So those, 60,000 at a time doesn't really move the needle very far. So
How much does 50 million gallons cost?
We have 50 million
we pay
gallons that is disappearing in the nature.
70 something per thousand.
I mean, how can you must be missing a part of your network somewhere.
Yeah.
Water must be going somewhere you
That's,
don't know about.
We've been, that's been 8 years, right, Drew? Ever since I got here. One of the issues I have is that the people who listen to the pipes, there's some inaccuracy. That's not an exact science.
Yeah.
So we've had them say there's a leak here, and we dig it up, and we can't find a leak. And then, so we've dug a hole in the street, it's like 8 feet wide. Well, is the leak 10 feet further down? Like how much, good money are you gonna sink after this guy saying, I think there's a leak here?
I asked Jeff if he can bring him in, come in at midnight when everybody's asleep, there shouldn't be heavy use and they won't come in.
Yeah. The other thing
Imagine
that is in progress is we had somebody look at the pipe going out of our tower. There's a meter going in, but the way our tower works is it fills up a certain level. It drains out as people use it, and then it refills. So it's not a real-time what's going out. And the meter we have going out is not accurate, we don't believe. So we're going to have somebody calibrate that, but then the piping isn't right for the calibration. So there's some capital investment there. But we can compare then that number, especially Tony usually looks at our overnight readings to make sure they go pretty close to zero. But when we have our tower out reading more accurate and dependable, we can look at that as well. Just kind of check that baseline every night is something else that Glenn and I have been looking at before Glenn left, and now Tony.
Yeah.
You're talking about 50 million gallons. I mean, that most likely you guys are right with your network. You are correct with what you have. Something else is happening.
Well, I'm so curious what the cost of, if other communities is 20% a normal loss, or are we really on the high end, and how much is that annually? Because I think that indicates what we should do. If we're losing $2 million a year, then we ought to be investing that.
It's about $86,000. 86,000, okay,
Of lost,
of water that we buy and do not sell.
got
And
it.
again, you think of the, $350 a linear foot. And that, it's maddening because we've sat down, we've talked, what are we missing? And that's the point. Do you bring somebody in and who specializes in this? And a study like that, maybe that's $50,000. Maybe,
A study like that will
It's
also,
not a huge number, to be honest.
right?
Yeah.
will also lead to things in the ground that we don't
Yeah,
have right now. It'll be more money than that. But
right. Because there's some groups that spend money to listen. They install listening devices on their own infrastructure.
pressure sensors.
Yeah, I
cut
mean,
it
there's all kinds of investments to be had.
We thought we would find when we started this
The
8
meter
years
thing,
ago
yeah.
that we'd find a water main crossing a creek that's broken and it's just been dumping, into a creek forever. And It was not that simple, so we're,
At the golf course.
Yeah.
That's why it's wet.
That's why it's
That's right. But it is very frustrating.
I bet it is the golf course.
I'm sorry?
I bet there is something to do with the golf course. Right? Never
They
mind.
added a new water feature. No.
I believe they have a well that helps
Yeah.
support some of their irrigation at the golf
course.
Right. I had a quick question when you mentioned the PVC pipe that you guys put in along ravine or in the ravine. What's the life on that compared to like a metal pipe?
It should be comparable. I mean, they say 50 to 75 years, but some of that, I mean, PVC is not 100 years old like ductile and cast is. So we've had experience with some of the metal pipes. I spent half my career in Wisconsin where everything was plastic, so it didn't seem strange to me to go to PVC. We just have never done that in Lake Bluff. And part of that was because our crew is small. They know how to fix cast iron and ductile. They have all the parts and pieces. So they were a little resistant, I think, to switching over to PVC because they break differently and they require different tools. But at some point, if it's 10% cheaper and we can go further and stretch our dollars, that cost of those tools and maybe a little bit of training becomes, kind of a small amount compared to the savings.
That's interesting that it's almost the same longevity as the metal.
Well, if you listen to they say that we have pipes in Tangley, ductile iron water main in Tangley Oaks, it's 40 years old, that keeps breaking.
It's failing.
So there's,
Yeah.
in a perfect environment, I think the metal pipes would last longer, but our soils are corrosive to metal pipes. So in some areas, you get more of the clay on the pipe and they just don't last as long because they get corroded.
The plastic actually would probably
The
last
plastic
longer.
doesn't get corroded, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So that's a preview of water.
Do you want me to go over this?
Super,
chart
well, yeah,
really quickly?
sure. If it's okay with Sharon coming in.
So, preview of the rates and what it would look like, typical scenarios from every year we look at. The flat rate, no increase, which is the little orange dotted line. We look at a standard rate increase, so I just put in 2.5%. And then we've also looked at a flat increase for a few years and then holding. So this was a 3% increase for 2 years and then holding at that rate, and the green line is 2.5%, flat across the whole chart. Shows you where we end up in comparison to the target reserve balance. And also this sheet increased, unlike the capital and the budget sheets, increased the infrastructure improvement to 500,000.
So, but Tina, this assumes the numbers that we've talked about before for the fund.
Right.
And then the green line is okay. In addition to those numbers, it's a 3% increase a year.
The green line is a 2.5% increase.
Okay.
Flat across the whole term up to 2030.
Yeah.
It includes a $500,000 infrastructure contribution, not 400, which is what's been previously
Yeah.
discussed. The kind of fatter orange line is 3% for 3 years and then holding that rate flat. And then the sinking line is no increase.
And we try to stay right at that
Right.
target blue line.
And historically, we've done, every biennial budget has included one rate increase. We have not adjusted the infrastructure improvement number for inflation. So we've always assumed just a flat number, and that really just brings us to less infrastructure improvements for the same number, instead of at least going with a 3 or 4% increase per year and then adjusting that rate based on that. We haven't done that, which I could present for next time if you wanted to see what that would look like.
Well, just looking at this software, how do you compare that in terms of just the time involved with all the schedules that you would prepare to kind of, walk through the various scenarios?
So it's an import of our data from our financial software system. It would automatically tie and match to the audit. And then it's just a matter of changing a scenario percentage. From what I've been shown, it looks very simple for a lot of robust,
Yeah.
ability to take.
So it would really be a big
Charts out.
time saver for you.
It would be.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have done our agenda and then some. Thank you.
Contrary to past practice.
I know, I
Yeah.
know. And even despite a little bit of a late start, so don't feel too bad, Steve. We got through a lot. I think we went through everything. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are closed
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
No, it was good. Thank you.